Number 10. The Well of Hell. There's a giant pit in the country of Yemen that locals have long believed is either a prison for genies or a secret gateway into the underworld. It's known as the Well of Barhout or the Well of Hell, and it's truly a terrifying place. In the middle of the otherwise flat and barren desert, the well is an almost perfectly circular sinkhole that seems to lead to mysterious unknowns. In truth, it's the entrance to a cave, one that was only first fully explored in 2021. A group of cave explorers from Oman recently became the first people to reach the very bottom of the infamous Well of Hell. They descended 367 feet to the bottom of the natural sinkhole in the Al-Mara province. Other cave explorers have entered the sinkhole before, but this was the first team to go all the way to the bottom. What they discovered there is pretty amazing. The explorers found 10 cave pearls, animal carcasses, live snakes, and subterranean waterfalls. The jagged floor was covered in stalagmites. It's unknown exactly how long this sinkhole has existed, but it's likely millions of years old. And because the locals have been terrified of it for centuries, it's been totally isolated from humans. The cave explorers discovered frogs, beetles, and an entire ecosystem living in isolation from the rest of the world in an underground oasis you'd never expect to find under the sandy surface of the desert. Number 9. Sunken ship from World War II. During World War II, German submarine commanders started attacking merchant shipping vessels along the eastern coast of the United States of America. It proved to be one of their worst decisions because it was what ultimately dragged the United States into the war against the Axis powers. One of the ships destroyed by the Germans during these attacks was the American steam tanker called Dixie Arrow. It was struck by a torpedo on March 26, 1942, and then it gradually sank to the bottom of the ocean. Over 75 years later, National Geographic created a special program called Drain the Oceans. Using sonar technology and deep ocean scans, the project showed what the bottom of the ocean would look like if the water was gone and it was turned into a desert. What was revealed on their program was a hypothetical landscape covered in hundreds upon hundreds of giant vessels amidst the rock and sand of this new desert. The Dixie Arrow, which was once a merchant vessel carrying 86,000 barrels of oil, would be like a mountain of rusted metal rising from the dust. Number 8. Tobacco in Utah. Even though it's beginning to fall out of favor with the younger generations in modern times, humankind has been addicted to tobacco for roughly 12,500 years. In the middle of the Utah desert, archaeologists recently found what they believe to be evidence of the earliest use of wild tobacco. The researchers found coyote tobacco at the Wishbone site in northwestern Utah. The seeds of the tobacco plant were found scattered around an ancient hearth in the Great Salt Lake Desert, not exactly somewhere you picture ancient Native Americans sitting around and having a chew. But thousands of years ago, the desert was a lake, and an area rich with both wildlife and prehistoric humans living in its marshes. The ancient people didn't use tobacco in the form of cigarettes or cigars, but instead nibbled on tobacco plants, somewhat similar to the way that some people chew tobacco today. Based on the evidence, humans sat around the fire and chewed wild tobacco plants to get a release of nicotine, granting them a quick dopamine high. We knew humans did this about 3,500 years ago, but this has come as a total shock. It's pushed the date of humans using nicotine back over 9,000 years. Number 7. The Desert Crop Circle. The Desert Breath, an art installation in Egypt, looks eerie and confusing when viewed from the ground. Rising out of the flat and empty vastness of the Egyptian desert, these look like perfectly symmetrical alien anthills, with matching pits for each hill nearby. So what is this place exactly? Desert Breath is an art installation that was completed in 1997. Conical protrusions and conical depressions were made along the desert floor here in one of the biggest and most impressive modern geoglyph projects ever undertaken. On the ground, it doesn't look like anything important. It's not until you see it from above that you understand that the 89 cones and their 89 matching depressions create a mesmerizing spiral. They make a pair of geometrically matching arms that start at a central axis and spin away from each other farther and farther. It's a feat of mathematical precision that took modern technology to complete. The desert crop circles, as some call them, were designed to erode back into the desert sands. In just a few years, the whole thing will be gone. Are you interested in seeing Desert Breath before it disappears? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 6. Sea cows. Fascinating art projects aren't the only thing hiding in the Egyptian desert. Researchers have also come across the fossilized remains of sea cows. As you probably know already, the dry desert of Egypt was once completely underwater around 35 million to 40 million years ago. It was a time when swimming above the desert floor were the ancient relatives of manatees and dugongs, also known as sea cows. Scientists recently found a small collection of fossils that were once part of a creature belonging to the ancient family of Sirenia. This is an order that includes all dugongs, manatees, and their extinct relatives. It was a bit of a surprise for scientists who had never before found a Sirenia fossil in this area, the Beni Suef Formation. They discovered its ribs, some pieces of vertebrae, and limb bones back in 2019. But here's something that will really surprise you. Just like ancient whales, prehistoric sea cows once lived on land. They had legs and walked around, but gradually slipped into the ocean and became marine animals. The oldest known sirena ever found was in Jamaica, dated at 50 million years old. It was a semi-aquatic beast with hind limbs. Have you ever seen a manatee or dugong in real life? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. The AYAZ Kala Fortresses. The AYAZ Kala is a complex archaeological site in Uzbekistan, located at the very edge of the Kizilkum Desert. It was part of the defensive line of fortresses built in a barren wasteland to defend the agricultural settlements beyond. The forts were built to keep out nomadic raiders that used to roam across the desert, as well as to keep the nomadic Saka who lived in the Eurasian steppe from taking advantage of the rich and fertile oasis created and maintained by the locals. The fortresses were built over a period of about 1100 years, from the 4th century BC until the 7th century AD. The first is called AYAZ Kala I, a ruin sitting on a rocky outcrop. It was used not only as a defensive fortress, but also to house the people all the way into the medieval period. There are 2 other major fortresses, both of them hardly standing. But what's really interesting is that looking at them now, they don't appear to be protecting anything. Hundreds of miles in every direction is a wasteland, and it's hard to imagine anyone who would have lived there. That's just how quick landscapes can change, in even just a few centuries. Number 4. The Geoglyphs of the Thar Desert. The largest geoglyphs in the world were discovered in India's Thar Desert. The geoglyphs here have been described as the largest geometrical painting made by human hands ever. It's a massive spiral artwork covering a vast distance of roughly 51 acres. In one direction, the geoglyphs go on for 30 miles, reaching nearly to the border of Pakistan. The geoglyphs were formed using both earth and stone and are far larger than the Nazca lines in Peru. Researchers don't know why these lines were made in the desert, but they definitely weren't meant to be pictures of animals or figures. Instead, the geoglyphs are all geometric patterns. One interesting point is that several rock burials have been found within the space of the geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found several memorial stones carved with images of Hindu deities such as Krishna and Ganesh. The lines could have been used in some kind of grand ceremony or for some Hindu celebration. Like other geoglyphs, however, the exact purpose or function remains a mystery. These amazing, massive, record-breaking geoglyphs were only discovered in 2014 thanks to Google Earth. We still don't know exactly how old they are, but some estimates put them at being made as recently as 200 years ago. That's kind of shocking considering nobody knows anything about them. You'd think such a huge project constructed only 2 centuries ago would be remembered. Number 3. The California Viking Ship. Somewhere deep in the Colorado Desert of California, there may or may not be a buried treasure ship left behind by the Vikings. Some say the ship is nothing but a legend. Others believe in it wholeheartedly. Some have even claimed to see the ship with their own eyes, its wooden timbers jutting through the sand like the corpse of some prehistoric wooden beast. One of the people who say they saw the ship was a librarian named Myrtle Botts. In 1933, when she was hiking with her husband through the desert, she came across a ship stuck in the rocky face of Cannebrake Canyon. It was made of wood, it had decorations on its flanks that looked to be Viking, and it had a serpent carved on its prow. What's really crazy is that Myrtle said the ship was so high up that neither she nor her husband could reach it. It looked as though it had crashed into the cliff. But before Myrtle and her husband could return with help, an earthquake shook California, the rock was dislodged, and the ship was buried. There have been other sightings of the ship since then, lost under a heap of sand and stone. But nobody's ever actually dug it out of the desert. Most people don't even believe it's there, and you can't really blame them. After all, how in the world could the Vikings have gotten a ship all the way to California? What do you think? Is it somehow possible for a Viking ship to have made its way to the California desert? Could it be part of an abandoned movie set? Or is the whole thing simply a tall tale? Let us hear your theories down below. Number 2. Aboriginal Australians. Shocking new information has pushed back occupation of the Australian desert 25,000 years. Archaeological work at a rock shelter at the desert site of Karnatukul, which used to be known as Serpent's Glen, proves that the Aboriginal Australians were living in the middle of the desert in Western Australia for over 50,000 years. The site of the rock shelter was 620 miles from the coastline all that time ago, and was still a desert even back then. It's bizarre because it means the original native people of the continent settled along the shore, then preferred to go into the wastelands and live in the scorching heat. The site of Karnatukul was first investigated in the 1990s and was then considered to be the oldest site in the Australian desert, occupied 25,000 years ago. But when researchers went back just recently and started looking at artifacts, rock art panels, and using modern radiocarbon dating, it became clear that the site is much older than originally believed. Researchers had over 25 stone artifacts to analyze, as well as charcoal from ancient hearths, animal bones, and pigments used in stone paintings. By far the strangest part, though, and what scientists can't understand, is the fact that they were living in the desert at all. Why would they choose to live in the blistering hot, arid zone when they could have settled near the warm, balmy coastline with more abundant resources? Perhaps there's more to this story yet to be discovered. Number 1. The Rock Engravings of Namibia. The Twyfelfontein rock engravings in Namibia are fascinating. They date back to the Stone Age and are spectacular petroglyphs that show animals and the daily activities of hunter-gatherers who created them. This place became a UNESCO site in 2007, but had already been a major national monument for Namibia since 1952. The main reason this is such a cool site is that it boasts the largest concentration of Stone Age rock engravings in all of Africa. There are over 2,500 pictures carved into over 200 sandstone blocks, with the oldest dating back over 6,000 years. This was a time when the African desert was overflowing with nomadic tribes. It's believed the engravings were made by the Khoi nomads, the second group of humans believed to have occupied the area. They made the petroglyphs to depict the animals they hunted, primarily elephants, ostriches, antelopes, and even giraffes. One of the reasons they felt compelled to draw all this stuff had to do with their belief in spirits. The Bushmen felt it was necessary to record the animals they killed and to document their ritual practices. They believed each animal had a special spiritual quality. For example, elephants and wildebeest were closely connected to water, while other animals had different spiritual connections. Etching the animals in stone was a way for the Khoi to tell their story and keep their beliefs immortalized. If you could journey to just one desert on Earth, which would you choose? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back again soon for another awesome video right here on American Eye.